Welcome back to the book log, everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. As usual, warning off the top, there will be spoilers in this review. This is a great little October Halloween novella, which is around the time that I read this. It's very short and concise, but still manages to be spooky and atmospheric and fun and kind of campy, which I think fits the season well. The gimmick here is that this story is a reimagining of The Fall of the House of Usher, the very classic gothic short story written by Edgar Allan Poe. I read that story recently, which is part of the reason why this one was interesting to me in the first place, and I think What Moves the Dead genuinely does play off the original concept in a variety of interesting ways. I'll briefly summarize the original story, which should be easy as it's incredibly short. The original The Fall of the House of Usher follows an unnamed narrator who visits his ailing childhood friend Roderick Usher at the family mansion. The Usher estate is this enormous, bleak, decaying mansion, and as Poe does, he vividly paints it with this thick, gloomy, uneasy atmosphere. For some reason, Roderick suffers from extreme sensitivity to sound and light, and his twin sister, Madeline, is afflicted by some mysterious illness that leaves her catatonic for long stretches. The narrator stays to keep Roderick company, but as the days pass, the house's oppressive atmosphere becomes unbearable, and Roderick has this idea that the house itself is literally alive, which starts to feel more and more legitimate. When Madeline apparently dies, Roderick insists on entombing her in a vault beneath the house before her burial. And then the whole ending sequence is Roderick becoming increasingly agitated, believing that they have accidentally buried Madeline alive. So the narrator reads aloud from a book to calm him down, and then somehow sounds from the tale begin to echo in real life through the mansion, and it turns out that they're the sounds of Madeline, who was escaping the tomb and who then appears in the doorway covered in blood, and then both her and Roderick drop dead, basically. The narrator flees the house, and when he turns to look back, it splits apart and disintegrates and sinks into the Tarn, which is the little dark lake that surrounds the property. The House of Usher, both the building and the family, perish together. So this is the framework that What Moves the Dead is operating in, and like I said, the original short story is very sparse, so there are a lot of ways that you can extrapolate and add additional information and context, and I think T. Kingfisher makes a lot of interesting decisions in this regard. The first difference is that instead of an unnamed narrator, there is actually a main character named Alex Easton, who narrates the story in the first person. Alex is from the fictional country of Galatia, where they have an interesting pronoun system in which there are masculine and feminine pronouns as usual. Children have their own, and then also soldiers have their own as well. Once you sign up to be in the military, that becomes like your new personal pronoun classification, and this is called being a sworn soldier. Alex basically has the gender of soldier, in other words. As you can imagine, I've seen various people get really mad about this component of the book, but just take a deep breath and relax about it. It's really not much deeper than being a tidbit of this character and this world building. The bones of the plot follow relatively close to that of the original story. Alex is invited to the house. In this book, Madeline sends the letter as opposed to Roderick in the original story. And upon arrival, they are surprised at the physical state of both Roderick and Madeline. They look incredibly gaunt and thin and pale and sickly and just generally of bad health. Madeline in particular looks almost on the verge of death, like her hair is turning white and she has soft little white hairs growing out of her body for some reason. She can only talk in a whisper. She just seems incredibly fragile and unwell. There are also a few new characters added to the story that you don't find in the original that help flesh out the world. There's Alex's traveling companion, Arthur, who's this brusque old Scottish dude. There's Denton, the American doctor, who is frequently made fun of for his overt Americanness. And most importantly, in my opinion, there's Miss Eugenia Potter. Miss Potter is an extremely British mycologist who happens to be in the area because of the wide array of different species of fungi that live there. She likes to draw and study mushrooms for classification purposes, and for whatever reason, the area surrounding the Usher property is filled with all sorts of interesting and unknown varieties. At first, this just seems like another unique addition to the ambiance of this world, but it turns out that these fungi have an extremely important bearing on the plot as well, and the way it all unfolds is probably one of my favorite components of this book. The first weird thing Alex notices is that the hairs around the property act incredibly strange. They aren't afraid of people at all. They will just sit there and stare you down. And on top of that, they move in this remarkably unsettling way where they crawl across the ground one limb at a time. If that's not strange enough, at one point Alex even shoots one of these hairs in the head and it still somehow doesn't die. It just sits there and stares with whatever's left of its face. There are legends around the area that the hairs are cursed, but Alex is very skeptical of that sort of thing and thinks something else must be going on. The next strange thing is the tarn outside the property, which again is just a little lake. Instead of it being normal water though, it's unusually matte and dark, almost black. It doesn't seem to have the consistency of water when things are thrown into it, and to make matters even stranger, on a couple of occasions Alex saw strange green lights shining in the tarn as if it were reflecting stars in the sky, even though that wasn't possible because it was a completely overcast night. As I have already alluded to, the explanation for both of these things ends up being an extremely rare form of fungus. A fungus so strange and complex that it seems to be forming some rudimentary form of awareness all on its own. This turns out to be the explanation for the strange hairs, like they drink from the water, get infected, and the mycelium networks spread throughout the body until they're able to control it, even after it's dead. That's what moves the dead. At one point, Denton leads an autopsy of the hair, and they find it's filled with all of this strange white filament. Strands of puffy white fungal thread have just completely filled the creature's lungs and head and are just all throughout its body. And from there, it's an easy conclusion to draw that this same affliction is what currently has a hold on Madeline. Just as in the original Poe story, at a certain point, it's revealed that Madeline has died and her body is buried in the crypt beneath the house. After a couple days, Alex goes to check on the body, and it has disappeared from the crypt as if it just stood up and walked away somehow. And I'm sure you can connect the dots from there, but the same fungal infection is responsible for this as well. It turns out that Madeline actually died weeks ago after drowning in the infested tarn, and since then, the infection has been animating her dead body. This also explains the strange thin white hairs that were growing out of Madeline's body. Just as in the original story, What Moves the Dead ends with Alex fleeing the scene as the House of Usher is destroyed. In the original, it just collapses, but in this book, Roderick deliberately burns it down, but in either case, the house ends up in ruin. In this case, the characters also end up dumping a bunch of sulfur powder into the tarn in order to neutralize the source of the fungus. Overall, I just thought this was an incredibly creative and well done take on the fall of the House of Usher. I was a bit skeptical of the entire idea at first, but it really won me over in the end. It's its own narrative, it's doing its own thing, but it's using this classic story as the foundation or the backdrop, and I just think it's a really cool concept. And the author's notes at the end, T. Kingfisher says something to the effect of wanting to make the horror of the story not evil, but alien. And I think that's a perfectly succinct way of explaining why I liked it. The imagery of the fungi in the lake lighting up green like a neural network, and these strange little white filament strands infecting and animating the bodies of corpses. It's all so colorful and bizarre and unsettling, all on top of the foundation of the original story, which is already so strong. Everything works together in tandem very successfully. I like the characters, I like the writing, I thought the book was engaging and humorous and weird and spooky. Like I said, just a fantastic little Halloween novella. I'm gonna give this 8 out of 10.